Hello and welcome. Okay, got the thumbs up. Awesome, thank you. So for anyone new to the stream, each week we pick a new national park to explore together. This week we're exploring this way, Joshua Tree National Park. We'll also vote near the end on the next national park we'd like to explore together. So keep an eye out for that and other comments or polls in the chat as we fly. Also, feel free to post your own questions or thoughts. I love chatting with all of you, so love chatting about whatever you'd like to. Small disclaimer, yes, I am a pilot, but we'll be taking full advantage of the simulator, so please don't try this in real life. I've also researched the park in preparation and prepared a couple of related topics. I also worked on improving some of their Wikipedia pages. So why Wikipedia? I use it to make sure that the facts here are cited and are checked by others, and it gives back to a living body of knowledge that goes beyond our hour here together. To that end, if you notice anything missing or that could be clarified, please help improve the Wikipedia pages. As the wiki community often says, be bold and make the updates. So without further ado, I'm Jules Altus, and I'll be your pilot for this evening. So sit back, relax, and let's explore Joshua Tree National Park. And he seamlessly rolls out of the intro into, thank you, Fractals. So we're doing a sunrise takeoff, or liftoff here. So Flying Singer, I see you out there in a little bit. Anyone else flying along? So it's about 6 a.m. Local time. Beautiful sunrise on the mountains here. This is Coachella Valley that we're flying in, actually, which I didn't realize was so close to Joshua Tree. All right, get myself up in the air here. So today we're flying a Beechcraft Bonanza G36, so Golf 36. Looks like this. Pretty single prop plane. Lots of fun to fly. Small, I put it on the administrative updates section, but it's a little bit more of a fun fact. So we're flying over Coachella Valley, like I mentioned. That's where the Coachella Music Festival is held. And that would have happened about 2 weeks ago, except it was canceled this year. So we'll see the site. We'll fly over in just a minute here, actually. Let me get myself set up to climb. I mentioned this, but I'll typically show how I set up the autopilot for anyone who's flying along and wants to see at least how I'm doing it. So I'm turning on nav mode, and then I'm going to set it to be vertical speed mode. There you go, slightly different on this plane. Change my altitude selected to 5,500. And then change my feet per minute to be about 500 feet per minute. And that should get us right about to where we want to be. All right, I think we're set up here. So Fractals posted that up. I missed the top vote on here. Oh, it says great. Not yet was the most recent option. Okay, so we had a couple people who have been there before. That's awesome. Joshua Tree's definitely on my list of parks to go visit. Oops, for the last 10 years. Oh, Fractals, I didn't know you'd been there. That's really cool. And yeah, Fractals, I love the sunrise over the mountains. Spend a moment here outside the plane. So a little bit about Joshua Tree National Park. The park purpose statement, which again is from the foundation document to the park, so it kind of gives an overview of why the park exists. If you're ever curious to learn kind of the overview of different national parks, it's a really good entry point. So there's the park purpose statement, and then there's a bunch of, I can't remember what they call them, but it's a list of sort of reasons why it's important. And there'll be like 8 to 10, and it's a really good way to learn a little bit more. So Joshua Tree National Park preserves and protects the scenic, natural, and cultural resources representative of the Colorado and Mojave deserts, rich biological and geological diversity, cultural history, wilderness, recreational values, and outstanding opportunities for education and scientific study. So to highlight a particular phrase they mentioned there, it's this intersection of the Colorado and Mojave deserts. And we'll fly actually across that boundary between the two deserts a couple of times in the flight. So look for that. You'll notice it in the iPad. Let me see if I can get this to show up. Looks like we're a little delayed on the iPad. But it'll show up. It'll be kind of a dotted line here. So I'll zoom in real close so you can see what I'm talking about. that means that we've crossed the desert. So on the left side here is the Mojave, and on the right is the Colorado. Pop back here. So that's the park purpose statement. There is a fun little summary of the... Oh, I see. Nice Devados trace. That's cool. Yeah. Probably me too. Although I've learned there's an airport right nearby, so now I feel like I should fly down there and go see it. Anyway, you can see actually Flying Singer's right over. You can see the music hall or the main stage right up ahead. Kind of cool. So like I was saying, there is a video of a little bit more background on the park. So I'll pull that up. It's done by a outreach group that does work. He'll give a little bit of overview on what the group does, but it's a really nice set of footage about the park. It talks a little bit about the geology. You get to meet Ranger Christian. I'll also pause it partway through because Ranger Christian gives this explanation of how the rocks ended up looking how they do in Joshua Tree, and there's a better video that I liked. It's about a minute long, so we'll do it's like a 5-minute long video. I'm going to pause it in the middle, play a 1-minute long video, and then go back to the 5-minute long video. It should be pretty straightforward when you see it. Also, just an apology for the lower audio quality. It sounds like they recorded everything out on kind of a windy day, so you'll be able to make out the words, but it's a bit of a... You'll see. It's like you're in a national park recording a video. Okay, here we go. So there, and that is where all the... just for the curious, that little place with all the tent-looking things is the main area, and then all the fields here would be where you would camp for Coachella. So, now you know. All right, let's pop back in our plane.
If you missed our previous video, first day in Joshua Tree, start there. You can find the link in our description below. In today's video, our wonderful guide, Ranger Christian, will share with us the various desert creatures, cacti, and geology that inhabit this beautiful place. Join me, Vincent, and our team, Abby, Sunny, and Alaire, on our day 2 of camping in this beautiful national park. Let's go. Before we leave for the day, our instructors securely pack up all food and anything with a smell that would attract animals. The last thing you want is to come back at the end of the day to your items torn up, strewn around, and not to mention, it's pretty bad for the wildlife. We also keep an eye out for items that may fly away or be damaged by the intense desert sun.
Today, we are lucky to have Ranger Christian show us one of his favorite hikes in Joshua Tree. Christian has been an interpretive ranger here for 9 years and has supported Outdoor Outreach in delivering educational information to our students. Outdoor Outreach has introduced over 1,500 youth to Joshua Tree through our overnight climbing programs.
Interpretive ranger here at Joshua Tree National Park. I've been working here for almost 9 years, and I'm glad that everybody's here, and we are in the perfect place to talk geology, so I hope you're ready to learn. Okay, so we're in a spot in the park, inside Joshua Tree National Park, called the Wonderland of Rocks, and like I said, it's a really great place to learn about rocks, and one of the most popular questions is from park visitors is like, how did these rocks get here, and why do they look the way they do? You know, basically they are cooled magma. They're intrusive igneous rocks. Intrusive, meaning that they rose up from very deep underground and intruded into the crust above them and then stopped and cooled. And also igneous, because igneous in Latin means born of fire. So these rocks are magma that cooled and solidified into Monzo granite very, very deep underground. This is called creosote. That's the common name for.
Okay, quick pause there. So his explanation of the rocks, here's a visual version of what that looks like. There's no audio, so I will read the titles as we go. So the rocks in Joshua Tree are the result of Earth's changes over millions of years, as the Earth's crust broke into pieces that are constantly moving, tectonic plates, as you might remember. So let's go back 270 million years. And who knows what happens then? Pangea. So this is the same sort of thing we were talking about when we were looking at Pinnacles National Park. We talked about the Farallon Plate and how it dove under the continent. So this piece is a little bit more about the actual formation of these intrusive rocks that form underneath these magma chambers. So about a million years ago, they cooled into stone, and then they started to crack under pressure. Since then, the ground above has been eroding away. And as water seeps into the crack, it slowly turns the rock to soil. And as that wears away, then you get these towers of rocks that we see in Joshua Tree. So when we flip back to the start of the video, you'll see in the background all these rocks have these weird cracks all over the place. It's part of the reason people love to go rock climbing there. All right, back to this one. We'll watch about 2 more minutes of this one.
For this species, it's Laurea tridentana is the scientific name. I love that name. This is my favorite plant in the park. And it's really overlooked by a lot of park visitors because there's so much of it. People also refer to this as desert rain plant because when it rains, that unique smell you smell like before and during a rainstorm comes from this plant. And you can smell it even when it's not raining if you just take like a big clump of it and kind of bundle it up and breathe like some hot breath on it and then stick your nose in there. Native Americans also use this plant for a lot of different, I've heard it referred to as Native American penicillin because it was so important to the native people that lived here in what is today Joshua Tree National Park. The namesake of this park is the Joshua Tree. Its scientific name is Yucca brevifolia. The average lifespan of a Joshua tree is about 150 years, which is not long for a plant. They can live up to 300 to 400 years. There's some evidence of that in like very rare cases, but the majority of Joshua trees, probably their lifespan is around 150 years.
You may come across Ranger Christian or another ranger during your visit. Stop and say hi. They are happy to share their passion for this beautiful place with anyone who has interest.
At the end of our hike, we say bye to Ranger Christian as he heads off to Keys View for an educational program.
Another popular activity you may see out in Joshua Tree is rock climbing. Rock climbing is a sport that folks of various ages and abilities may enjoy.
All right, we'll pause there. So the rest of their trip is about rock climbing, which we talked about at Yosemite. So we'll hopefully that was interesting. It's kind of a good visual overview of the park, and you can see how spread out the trees are, which is it's a particular way that style of tree grows. So. Oh, Flying Singer, I'd be very curious if you see the same thing in your game, but there's a random patch of gray in mine, which seems to have been there every time I was practicing, so I don't know, whatever. That's not what it looks like in the real world. Quickly before we move on to our first topic today, so looking back, this is Coachella Valley. Let me pull up a picture. When you go to Joshua Tree, there's a view called the Keys View, And this is what you would see from that view. And in the distance, you can actually make out the Salton Sea over here, and then there's the rest of Coachella Valley, and then we're kind of flying off to the right side right now. So you get a pretty magnificent view from the park at the top of the mountains. The other thing to know is that the Coachella Valley is about maybe 100 feet above sea level, and some of the higher points of Joshua Tree are 5,500 feet above sea level. So we're going to be climbing, we actually already are at our altitude, but it's pretty big elevation change that you see off to the right when you look out. Oops.
For just $67.
Okay. Crazy Tycho, yeah. Gotta go pick up some extra ones afterwards. You can practice your tectonic plates. Fractals, do you want to go with the first poll here? Our first topic of today is palm trees. And palm trees because we are flying over 29 Palms Highway in about 2 seconds, so that's sort of the immediate relation. The other reason is that Joshua Tree preserves and protects palm habitat examples in the Little San Bernardino Mountains, so that's these mountains off to our right here. We'll talk about palms in general, not just palm trees, but for now we can talk about the palms that are being referenced here, the naming of the highway and some of the palms in the area. So this is a California palm. It's or known by a couple other names. So Washingtonia filifera, which is also known as a desert fan palm, the California fan palm, or just a California palm. It's a flowering plant in the palm family native to the far southwestern United States and Baja California. It grows, seeing some of these poll results come in, we'll give folks a second here. It grows to be to about 49 to 66 feet tall, and it'll get about 10 to 20 feet broad. So it's a big tree. The California palm is the only palm native to the western United States and one of the country's largest native palms, exceeded in height only by the Cuban or the Florida royal palm. So here's a picture from, oops, let me put that poll back up. There we go. So here's a picture from actually a grove right near these mountains. So this is some 50 miles behind us right now. But this is a native palm tree that grows in the area. And it's also, when the highway is named 29 Palms and there's some other areas that reference palm trees, it's this palm that they're talking about. Okay. And it looks like, so we got about, almost everyone got the correct answer on this one, which is the fan-leaved or feather-leaved. The other two options were the pointy-leaved or round-leaved, and then the big-leaved or small-leaved, which was sort of, I got asked once to give a bunch of types of dogs was the sort of thing. It was like a game where you had to name everything in a category you could think of, and there's types of dogs, and so people were naming all the different, Labrador or I don't know, golden retriever, whatever else, all the different kinds of dogs they could think of, and someone said big dog. So not big little leaves, but yeah, it's feather and fan leaved. Fractals, yeah, that's right. Get something out of that merit badge. Okay, so what about palms in general? So we talked about palm trees for just a moment there. Palm growth can be either climbers, shrubs, tree-like, or stemless plants. So there's a bunch of different forms that it takes, and all of these are commonly known as palms. Most palms are distinguished by their large, compound, evergreen leaves, known as fronds, arranged at the top of an unbranched stem. So if you picture a palm tree with the fronds at the top, it's kind of a classic look for a palm. However, palms exhibit an enormous diversity in physical characteristics and inhabit nearly every type of habitat within their range, from rainforests to deserts. They're notable among monocots for their height and for their size, and for the size of their seeds, leaves, and flower clusters. I used a word in there, monocot, and so we'll talk about a monocot really quick because it's relevant to palm trees. It's also relevant to Joshua trees in this park. So what is a monocot? Fractals, you can pull out your ecology merit badge again and see how much of this you remember. So quick biology sidebar. Flowering plants can be divided into monocots and dicots. The cot part of that word refers to the cotyledon, which is the embryonic leaf in the seed-bearing plants. of which there can be one or more that first appear when the seed germinates. So when it first starts to grow, that's the thing that you're seeing. You have seen a cotyledon, almost certainly, if you've ever looked inside of a peanut. So when you crack open a peanut, they have that little thing in there. That's a cotyledon. So a monocot would have one cotyledon, and a dicot would have two or more in a flowering plant. There's a handful of standard differences between the two. So these are just the general rules. They don't always apply, but this is an overview of some of the differences. So I'll pull it up real quick. We can look. The most basic one would be that single cotyledon versus the two cotyledon. You'll also typically get long, narrow leaves and parallel veins in a monocot. So if you think like a palm tree's fronds, those parallel veins is because it's a monocot. Whereas in a dicot, you often get kind of branched leaf structures. You get vascular bundles that are scattered versus vascular bundles in a ring. We'll talk a little bit more about the ring part of it in a moment. And then you also get the flowers in multiples of 3 when it's a monocot versus multiples of 4 or 5 in a dicot. Okay, so all these things you don't need to remember, except that the palm tree is a monocot, which makes it or palms in general are monocots, which make them a little different from other types of plants you encounter. Well, it depends. I mean, grass is also a monocot, so you see these monocots everywhere. Let me pull up. So we're going to be flying over this first part of the park, over Black Rock Canyon. And it looks like this. The best picture I could find was a black and white photo, but you'll get the sense of it. So this is going to be our view in about 2 seconds out the plane. Pull that one up. Okay. So where do palm trees go? Most palm trees are native to tropical and subtropical climates. They thrive in moist and hot climates, but can be found in a variety of different habitats, including deserts. Their diversity is highest in wet lowland forests, so they're most diverse when it's a wet lowland forest. There's a couple of different things that make them unique in how they grow. As far as location relative to each other, palms have 2 different methods of growth, either solitary growth or clustered growth. So solitary growth looks like this. Okay, so you have one tree that's just sort of floating out of its own. If you remember the picture from the California palms earlier, it kind of was a bunch of trees sort of isolated. Joshua trees also are solitary growth. And that's why when we saw them from above, it looked like they were all spaced out so nicely. You can also get them clustered. So this would be a cluster of palms. However, palms, which are usually solitary, may grow in clusters, and vice versa. So a palm can kind of go either way. Hop out of the park here so we can see as we round out. So we're going to cross along the edge of the park, and you can see the mountain ranges, and then we'll cut into the park and go. Right now we're in the Mojave Desert, and then we'll fly down, and you'll see it drop as we go into the Colorado Desert. Leaves on the palms are large and evergreen typically, and they'll either be fan-leafed or feather-leafed. So that was the poll question from before. So fan-leafed looks like this. Okay, kind of like a fan. And then feather-leaved looks sort of like that. This is the best photo I could find, but it's that kind of like a feather on a bird, right, back and forth. And they're typically spirally arranged at the top of the stem. So in a palm tree, it's really clear because it's all way up at the top. But even on the ground, if it was a shrub kind of palm, they would have that same sort of pattern. The leaves have a tubular sheath at the base that usually splits open at one side at maturity, so the leaves will pop out of there. And when they die, so like if you look on this tree, we can zoom in and see. There you go. So there's the palm leaves as they die. Then they leave leaf scars, which are this kind of darker part beneath here. So I'll zoom in on a leaf scar so you can see it. So there's the top section is sort of the green part, and then, I'm sorry, the living part, and then the portion down here is the scars left from leaves as they died and fell off. This is sort of the base of the leaf. It actually goes all the way up the frond that goes to the top. So one sort of out there question, but Fractals seems to have worked a little bit in everything, or know someone who's done a little bit of everything, so I'll throw it out there anyway. I've always wondered if anyone has done maintenance or like cleaning up palm trees, or like had to deal with owning one or something, because I feel like maintenance on the leaves has to be really hard because if they fall, they're kind of dangerous. And so you must climb it and go prune them, or maybe you buy leaves that or palm trees that don't do that. Anyway, if anyone's ever had to deal with like maintaining palm trees or anything like that, I would be fascinated to hear what that experience was like. So I'll throw that out there. One of the other ones that I'll mention for these palm trees, speaking of the fronds falling off, is that some types of palm trees will hold on to their fronds, and then that becomes a sort of micro habitat for certain animals. So like the California palm, the same one we were talking about earlier, if you look, it has the old fronds it just holds onto here, and that becomes a place where birds can nest and that sort of thing. So a couple pieces on the trunks themselves. So palms don't have the ability to increase the width of their stem. This is called secondary growth. And they don't have the ability to increase the width of their stem in the same ways that a non-monocot would. So this is that thing where I mentioned that the fact that it's a monocot kind of changes a little bit about how it grows. So a non-monocot wooded plant would grow out in spiral rings that, you get those kind of growth rings that you might recognize. Instead, monocots, like some monocots, like the palm tree, grow out in a different way. It has a different name and sort of a different process. But that's why they're always so nicely cylindrically shaped. It's like if you look at the base of a palm tree, they're almost always this really nice circle. It's because they're a monocot. It's because they don't have the ability to grow out in rings like a dicot woody tree would. And so if you cut a palm tree down, then there's no rings. It's just wood. So. All right. Oh, let me catch up on the chat. 10th grade flashbacks. Yeah, that's fair. I had a pretty good 10th grade biology teacher. A lot of that comes back. Nice, playing singer. Yep. Very fun. What a beautiful place to spend any amount of time at. Yeah, that's awesome. You do know people who have done palm tree maintenance. That's pretty funny. Specific reason. Oh, that makes sense. I bet. Yeah, it becomes a specialty in your pruning. Yeah, that adds up. Yeah, I don't envy that job, but I'm glad that someone's out there. Okay, so we're coming up on Hidden Valley here, and Hidden Valley is a beautiful part of the park. This scenery in the game does not represent it very well, so let me pull up a couple of photos real quick. This is what it looks like. So you can kind of see, and there's the sort of rocks that seem like they're just sort of laying down and kind of scattered. That video we watched earlier probably formed. So that's where that comes from. So that's Hidden Valley. Again, not super well captured in the game, but apparently a beautiful place to go and stay. And they have campsites there, so you can stay among the rocks there if you want to. The other one we're coming up on in just a moment here is called Ryan Mountains. That's the mountain just ahead. I'm going to actually zip forward a couple hours so we can get a bit better lighting on this. Okay, so this is Ryan Mountain at sunset. That's mostly sky in this photo, but I'll scroll down so you can see the base here. It's pretty. It's got the same sort of rock formations out on the edge that we're passing over right now. And this is why we're flying at 5,500 feet. All right, so we talked a lot about palm trees, about their how they grow, what they are, monocots, that sort of thing. Another really important element about palm trees is their importance to society. So humans' use of palm trees is at least as old as human civilization itself, and it started with the cultivation of the date palm by the Mesopotamians and other Middle Eastern people about 5,000 years ago or more. So the date palm had a tremendous effect on the history of the Middle East. There's a historian who wrote, "One could go as far as to say that, had the date palm not existed, the expansion of the human race into the hot and barren parts of the Old World would have been much more restricted. The date palm not only provided a concentrated energy source, which could be easily stored and carried along on long journeys across the desert, it also created a more amenable habitat for the people who lived in, for people to live in by providing shade and protection from the desert winds." In addition, the date palm also yielded a variety of products for use in agricultural production and for domestic utensils, and practically all parts of the palm had a useful purpose. It's a very important plant, and when I was researching it, it struck me how, I had associated palms. I even have a note later, which is a lot of people think of, they see a palm tree, they think kind of vacations. That's kind of a modern interpretation of it. But historically, because of their importance as food, that date palm that I talked about, palms became symbols for ideas such as victory, or peace, or fertility. Of course, nowadays, a lot of people think of them as kind of a symbol of vacation, but all of these things are because it's such an important plant. That's why it has that connection to a lot of different parts of our life. Let me pull up a picture of a date palm, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen one before. So this is a date palm, and the dates you can see growing there. I always wondered where dates come from, so learn something. Another place where palm trees come up in society, the southeastern U.S. state of South Carolina is nicknamed the Palmetto State after the sable palmetto, and logs from which were used to build the fort at one of the forts for the American Revolutionary War. During that war, they were invaluable in defending the fort because their spongy wood absorbed or deflected the British cannonballs. So that's saying we saw that cross section, it's got that weird kind of texture to it. It's a little bit more spongy, great for cannonballs. That sable palmetto is the official state tree of both Florida and South Carolina. So in summary, palms are a monocot plant that can be climbers, shrubs, trees, or other forms. They mostly grow in tropical and subtropical climates, and they have either fan or feather leaves. They don't have growth rings. They have been critical to humans for thousands of years and continue to be an important symbol to us today. So this whole monocot, dicot thing was really interesting to me, and I remember learning about it back in probably 10th grade biology, and thinking about it now and understanding a little bit more about how it applies to the plants that we see all over the place. It got me thinking about the way that monocots and dicots grow differently, right? So the monocots grow really circular, and dicots can kind of grow in whatever way they want. That's why you get like knobby bases at trees sometimes and things like that. So it seemed like it would become maybe a good comeback down the road, like I know it doesn't actually apply to humans because we're not dicots or monocots, but bear with me, right? So it's interesting that a monocot literally can't grow that sort of like clumpy structure that dicots can. And so I'm thinking, right, maybe I've been putting on a little bit more of a belly, but maybe I'm just showing off my more flexible, dare I say evolved, growth patterns to all the boring circular monocots out there. Of course, then again, if you feel the need to prove yourself to plants, there's maybe other problems in your life you should be looking into. So I'll take that note and go figure out something else. Okay, but really, what kind of tree gives the best high fives? The palm tree. Okay, so our second topic today, and I don't know, let me see if I can quick fix this in the game. It seems like it's rendering a bit lower resolution than I would expect. Let's see. All right, well, maybe it'll just catch up. We are just flying over Jumbo Rocks right now, so whatever's going on that's giving it that sort of weird kind of generic texture, it looks like it resolves itself just down the line here, so we won't worry about it. But here's a picture of what Jumbo Rocks actually looks like in real life. And I mentioned that a lot of these rock sites you can go camping at, so this is a great example of actually just sleeping right up against the rocks here. Great place to go with kids, apparently. They can go and run around and climb all the rocks all day. All right, so our second topic for today is also a plant. You may be able to guess what plant it is. So to break up a little bit of the conversation, let's talk about our person of the week. So this week, we're talking about Minerva Hamilton Hoyt. And she's important to the park because she promoted the establishment of Joshua Tree National Park. So let me pull up a picture of what she looked like. Fascinating character to the park. So this is Minerva. Quickly before I dive into her backstory, so we're crossing down. If you came to the park, you would probably drive down this road that we're flying over, and that's also part of how you cross between the Mojave and Colorado deserts. And so you can kind of see on the iPad here as we cross, it's right about where I have that next waypoint coming up. In the game, it's got this unnecessarily strong line, and I don't know why it happens to fall right along that border, but that is sort of where the deserts change. I don't think it looks like that in the real world, but that's what it looks like. And you also see that the ground is falling out from beneath us pretty far. Okay, so Minerva Hoyt lived from 1866 to 1945, and she was an early American activist who worked to preserve California desert areas. She was born on a Mississippi plantation, and she later lived in the East Coast cities with her physician husband before moving to southern Pasadena, California in 1897. There, she gradually became deeply interested in desert plants and habitats. Hoyt became interested in Southern California's desert plants through her interest in gardening, particularly cactus and Joshua trees. After the death of her husband in 1918, she became concerned with the increased automobile traffic in the desert and that was threatening the area. Hoyt began making exhibition, and so remember, I don't have this in the notes, but it's useful background to know. She's sort of a socialite, so she moves to California and she's in all of these big social circles. She has a lot of money to work with, and she's very concerned about the deserts, and so she uses that influence and she uses that money to go and push for these things to be changed, things that she thought were important, which then results in us having Joshua Tree today. So the reason I mention that is she began doing she began to exhibit desert plants across the country to educate people about their qualities. These exhibitions were significant efforts. For a New York exhibition that she had, so from California to New York, 7 freight cars of rocks, plants, and sand were shipped across the country, and fresh flowers were flown in. In March of 1930, Hoyt founded the International Desert Conservation League, and throughout the 1930s, she worked to encourage the state of California to create 3 parks, including Joshua Tree, Death Valley, which we'll go to another day, and Anza Borrego Desert. In 1937, she gained support of the administration of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who designated more than 80,000 acres in California desert area as a Joshua Tree National Monument. When it became a national park, it went through some other changes. There was a lot of mining in the area, and so they kind of carved out the mines. And it's got a actually really long, interesting history. But the short version is that they designated a ton of space, and then they kind of started peeling that back when it became a national park, and then they started adding to it again. So she also worked to appeal to the Mexican government, appealing to them to set aside 10,000 acres for cactus preservation. So that's Minerva Hoyt. Howdy, Barney Rat. Talking about Minerva Hoyt, who was critical for Joshua Tree National Park, where we are flying, and in establishing it as a park at the time, and later became a national park. And that takes us into our second topic here. So Fractals, do you mind posting up the poll here? And this one's a little less scientific. It's a scientific fact, but it's a little more fun fact for you, I guess we'll say. So the poll is, what plant is in the same scientific family as yucca and Joshua trees? Is it tomatoes, potatoes, or asparagus? Give folks a second to vote on that one. So while folks are voting, we're doing back-to-back plant topics today. I had a list of like 6 or 7 topics, and palms and yucca plants, Joshua tree is the type of yucca plant, continued to pop up. It was that thing I mentioned with dried tortugas where it just sort of starts calling to you, and it's like, okay, I gotta do these topics. So bear with the double plants today. That also means that instead of writing 2 terrible plant jokes, we'll do we'll finish the section out with the best of all of your plant puns and jokes. So bring your best ones at the end of the section in 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes, and we'll throw different puns out there. For some reason, I feel like this is a very a group that likes puns, so hopefully you enjoy that. Crazy Tycho, that is true. All science facts are fun facts. Yep. I think there's a fun fact. There's a certain amount of groan you get from a good fun fact, you know? Maybe that's a dad joke. Anyway. So connection to the... I mentioned that Joshua trees are a type of yucca. We've also seen yucca plants in several other parks, including Big Bend, we went there, and White Sands. In fact, the yucca moth was a big reason we talked about moths when we went to White Sands, because the yucca moth there is so important. All right, so it looks like our votes here, we have about, a third of the votes for potatoes and 2/3 for asparagus. So the right answer for this one is asparagus, actually. So yucca plants, Joshua trees, are in the same family, capital F family, as yucca plants. So here's a Joshua tree. We saw a lot of them in the video, so I won't pull up a ton of photos, but this is a particularly big one. So what is a yucca? Yucca is a genus of perennial shrubs and trees. It has about 40 to 50 species, and they're notable for their circular arrangement of leaves, of evergreen, tough, sword-shaped leaves. So you'll notice that in all those pictures. You can kind of see it here, but we'll pull up a couple other yucca photos. Actually, let me pull up. Yeah, here we go. This is a good one. They're also known for their large terminal cluster of white or whitish flowers. So there's those sort of sword-shaped leaves, and then also the white flowers that you see at the top. They're monocots, just like the palm trees, and they're native to the hot and dry, kind of arid parts of Americas and the Caribbean. They are in the same scientific family as garden asparagus. So where does it grow? It grows in the vast area of the Americas, so it's all over the Americas. This is a map of the U.S. As I'm reading this, I'm realizing this is a good one I should have fact-checked. So the Wikipedia says Americas, but I think they mean the United States based on everything else that I read. But anyway, here's a map from the United States at least. We'll have the distribution. So you can kind of see through the central and then in the areas we're into. Yuccas have adapted to an equally vast range of climate and ecological conditions. They can be found in rocky deserts and badlands, in prairies and grasslands, and mountainous regions, light woodlands, coastal sands, and even subtropical and semi-temperate zones. So you name it, you can probably find a yucca there. They have a number of adaptations that allows for this sort of diverse and high level of survival. So most yucca have thick, waxy skins to prevent loss of water through evaporation. They frequently store water in thick roots, and some yuccas store water in thick, fleshy leaves. I'm sorry, I'm saying yuccas because well, this is good. It can be a Jack made a mistake. Everyone can hopefully learn from my mistake moment. So in my head, and while I was prepping all this stuff, I thought it was pronounced yucca. But this is actually pronounced yucca. Y-U-C-C-A. So yucca plant. And the reason I just realized I'm doing that is there is something called a yucca plant, which is actually, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but it's a different plant. Someone mistook them and named them after the same thing. It's kind of the short version of the history. So a yucca is what we're talking about. And so if your food puns involve jokes about yucca, good on you. Yucca with one C is a different type of plant that is more common in south of the United States, and it's just a different plant. It's also more, if you're thinking yucca and you're thinking about the root and sort of like maybe using it for cooking or something like that, the root of the yucca would be like that, but the root of the yucca, which is what a Joshua tree is different. So there's a very long-winded way of saying I meant to say yucca for the last 5 minutes because Joshua trees are yuccas. They are not yuccas. Okay, back on topic. So they store water in thick roots, and some yuccas store water in thick, fleshy leaves. Real quick before I keep going, so this area of the park is sort of the wilderness area. It's a little bit more away from everything. I'm going to pull up a picture real quick so you can see what it looks like. So that's what that looks like from space. And you can see Eagle Mountain is this kind of bottom right here is where we're going to be heading next. So we're kind of like up in here, we'll fly down. And then Eagle Mountain, where we're just about to be, looks like that. Oops, this way. All right. So, like I was saying about yuccas, they have a bunch of different survival mechanisms. Some desert plants have an oily coating on their leaves or pads that trap moisture, which thereby reduces water loss. And some species drop their leaves during a drought to prevent water loss due to transpiration. Dead leaves of yucca collecting against the trunk also help protect it from the sun, so it starts to build its own sort of shade by having those leaves fall around its base. Channeled leaves on the yucca direct dew and rainfall to their roots, so they can actually reach out and kind of bring it closer to the plant. Yuccas are also said to be fire adapted, meaning that they grow and spread vigorously after wildfires. Part of the reason that the Joshua Tree in this national park has done so well is that when a fire comes to clear everything out, the Joshua Tree will survive just fine and then thrive after that fire, so it continues spreading itself. That said, there's an invasive species of grass that's growing along the base of the desert, and that grass is causing hotter fires and faster fires than the Joshua Tree is able to handle. And so when we talk about the effect of invasive species, that's a pretty clear one with Joshua Tree, in that the plants themselves can't handle the heat that's coming from this type of grass that's starting to grow. So, a little bit more about the wildfires. Fire is a big part of a lot of national parks. I also mentioned this before, but there's a mutual relationship with the yucca moth. So yuccas have a very specialized mutualistic pollination system. The insect transfers the yucca moth transfers the pollen from one plant to another, and at the same time lays its eggs in the flowers. The marva loft then feeds on some of the developing seeds, but always leaves enough seed to perpetuate the species. As far as uses for yuccas, we talked a little bit about palm trees and their relationship to humans, so a little bit about yuccas. Yuccas are widely grown as ornamental plants in gardens. Many species also bear edible parts. This is the piece that I made already a confusion earlier, so however, references to the yucca root as food often arise from confusion of the similarly pronounced, but botanically unrelated, yucca, which is also called the cassava plant. So if you're thinking of a cassava or you think of the root, that is not a yucca, that's a yucca. And again, it's because someone thought they were the same thing, they named it after the same thing, and then they weren't. So. One particularly interesting use: in rural Appalachian areas, species such as the Yucca filamentosa are referred to as meat hangers. Remember, they have those long sword-like spears? So the tough fibrous leaves with their sharp-spined tips were used to puncture meat and knotted to form a loop with which to hang the meat for salt curing or in smokehouses. The fibers can be used to make cordage, be it sewing thread or for rope. So you can use the fibers of the yucca plant. Here at our window here. The yucca flower, as a quick side note, is the state flower of New Mexico. So we talked about some of the palm trees that are the plants of other states. So the yucca flower is the state flower of New Mexico. We'll close out about yuccas with a little bit about Joshua Tree in particular. One thing to know, you may have noticed as we're flying around that there are no Joshua trees in the game. There are no Joshua trees in the game. So before I do these streams, I'll post in some of the different flying communities about, hey, we're going to this park and here's what we're talking about and that sort of thing. And the number one comment was, it's too bad they don't have any of the trees here, so you can't see them. But hopefully the video from earlier at least gave an idea of what that would look like. So a Joshua tree is a tree-like yucca. It's reflected in its common names, which is Joshua tree, yucca palm, tree yucca, or palm tree yucca. The plant itself looks like this. And the flowers look like this. So it's that whitish flower we talked about. It's confined mostly to the Mojave Desert between 1,300 and 5,900 feet elevation. It's also one of the ways you can tell you've crossed from the Mojave to the Colorado Desert when you're in the park. It's because the Joshua trees sort of stop there. So there's their range. pretty well confined. It thrives in the open grasslands of Queen Valley and Lost Horse Valley and Joshua Tree National Parks. There are certain areas that it does really well in. If it survives the rigors of the desert, it can live for hundreds of years, some specimens even living thousands of years. That is from the Wikipedia sources. Christian earlier said that it was only a couple hundred years, so take it with a grain of salt, but it's a longer living plant. The name Joshua Tree is commonly said to have been given by a group of Mormon settlers crossing the Mojave Desert in the mid-19th century. The tree's role in guiding them through the desert, combined with its unique shape, reminded them of the biblical story in which Joshua keeps his hands reached out for an extended period of time to guide the Israelites in their conquest of Canaan. So, Joshua Tree named after Joshua from the Bible. At least that's the theory. Although, there's a lot of reason to believe that that might not be the case, but it makes a lot of sense. So, that's what people say. So in summary, the Joshua Tree is a type of yucca plant. Yucca in general are notable for their circular arrangement of evergreen, tough, sword-shaped leaves and large terminal cluster of white or whitish flowers. They have several adaptations for survival in harsh environments, which means you can find different types of yucca all over the country. They have a famous mutualistic relationship with the yucca moth, and the two organisms evolved together. Which leads us then right into plant puns and joke time. Does anyone have any good plant puns or jokes they want to throw out there? Yeah, Crazy Tycho, exactly. Would have helped a lot. We could have learned how to pronounce yucca too. Okay, so I have a couple written down. So, okay, yeah. So I wanted to tell this joke about a girl who only eats plants, but you've probably never heard of her. As a herbivore joke. So another one I particularly liked. So two plants are standing next to each other. One of them says, "What did you have for lunch?" The other says, "Oh, just a light meal." Crazy Tycho, yeah. Palm tree in a valley, I've got frowns in low places. I hope this will cheer you up. Cute. Good wordplay. So what happened when the two apple trees, what happened to the two apple trees that were planted together? They lived happily ever after. It's a very me pun. I also love apples. Okay. Nubados trees. I'm committed. Let's make this cacti a cactus. Cute. So, so excited I want my plants. Nice. There's some good marketing puns that I found when I was kind of searching around. Some clever plant stores putting out some things like that. All right, so why don't we close out there, and we can do. Feel free to keep posting plant puns, by the way. I love them, and I will read all of them. But we can start to close out. So Fractals, do you mind posting up the next one? Aw, Fractals, I'll owe you very much too. Well, Fractals posts up that poll. Today we talked about palm and palm trees. We talked about Minerva Hoyt. We talked about yucca, not yucca, yucca. And of course we talked about Joshua Tree National Park. I'll post a survey, or Fractals will post a survey in the chat. Thank you, Fractals. And I'd love to get your input on the show. Always useful to hear what people think, what things they like and don't like. Also, love if you want to come hang out in the Discord community. We chat about the national parks, talk about Microsoft Flight Simulator, flying in general. Always a blast. And there's also a link to Twitter if you want just like general notifications. I'll kind of post what the place we're going to is, just so people are aware of what the next park is. Okay, we'll give people a second. I see the votes coming in hot. Thank you, Fractals. So Fractals just post up those links. Let me spin around and see if I can find... Oh, there's another flying named person. That's funny. Hey there, Flying Singer. Taking the long trip around. This is one of those areas, when I was flight planning, I was like, I need to come fly here sometime. There's the Salton Sea off that distance too. Which, fun fact, so when we flew Pinnacles National Park, we flew down the San Andreas Fault. We didn't fly all the way down though. If we had, we would have gone right through Coachella Valley and finished at the Salton Sea. So we're actually sort of at the end of the San Andreas Fault. There's a bunch of other fault lines in this park. If we want to talk about tectonic plates here, it would have worked pretty well. Okay, I think that's the vote. So it sounds like we're going to Virgin Islands National Park next week. What fun. So I'm very excited to explore that with all of you. With that, thank you for being my co-pilot today. And until we meet again, stay curious and keep on exploring. And I will see you all next week.